This is a flying car, or at least the modern approximation of one. And so is this, and this, and this.
The dream of the flying car is really something that unites the biggest, most influential inventions of the 21st century. The big movies have featured these flying cars. Blade Runner with Harrison Ford in the 1980s, and even Back to the Future with Michael J. Fox.
We don't need roads.
The idea of flying cars has been around since, well, cars were invented, basically. Early versions, like the Curtiss autoplane, looked like a Ford Model T with wings attached to it. Unsurprisingly, these early attempts never really got off the ground. But public fascination hasn't waned. Today, a global gaggle of engineers and investors haven't given up on the flying car dream. But as they'll insist, just don't call it a flying car.
It's pretty terrible. It's EVTOL is the way that you say it. Yeah, not the most user-friendly acronym.
EVTOL, it sounds a bit enigmatic. It means electrical vertical takeoff and landing. The name is not maybe very sexy.
Sexy name or not, EVTOLs are a billion-dollar industry with some pretty big-name backers who are trying to cash in on this new mode of transportation. The question is, can this new generation of aircraft make it in the world? And do we even want them?
We've seen different types of partnerships emerge. So on the one hand, we have traditional aerospace, but then we also have seen the automotive industry engage.
The eVTOL industry is certainly an emerging industry. It has momentum. It has huge global ambitions. But at the same time, it's an entirely unproven market.
I've been always passionate about flight from a very young age, always looking up to the sky.
Tomaj Patan is the founder and CTO of Jetson, a company that's building a flying car. Sorry, eVTOL.
This is where we keep some of the fleet that is no longer in operation. This one has been testing parachutes for us, up until the point that one of the tests went sideways, and the whole passenger space is almost intact. So it's a good result of the test, and we have lots of data from it that we had redundant sensors on the vehicle that day. So for 11 years, I've been doing drones with camera gimbals. These drones were getting bigger and bigger. And at some point, I asked myself a question, what if we scale it so I could sit in there and pilot myself? You switch in. Probably everyone who first saw Jetson 1 noticed it's not like the rest of the eVTOL. It needs to be exciting. It has to be like a sports car.
Like a luxury sports car or ATV, Jetson's eVTOL is designed for personal use and can't be flown commercially. It's also not cheap. The Jetson 1 could set you back $128,000, and it's sold out through 2026. But not all eVTOLs are designed for personal thrill-seeking. One of the biggest commercial applications for the eVTOL is the air taxi, carrying passengers for short hops across crowded cities. But they have other uses too.
There's a host of other applications beyond that, which could turn into commercial opportunities. Talking like perhaps logistics, huge opportunities in cargo. Beyond that, you could go into the military areas, surveillance, reconnaissance, troop deployment on a small scale as well.
And investors are pouring a lot of money into them.
One of the reasons that this industry has drawn so much money, drawn so much investment, is the potential prize on offer. For instance, if you look at estimates from Morgan Stanley, the addressable market could be $1 trillion by 2040.
But what exactly makes an EVTOL? Well, an EVTOL. Let's break it down, shall we? EVTOLs are a new class of aircraft that are able to take off and land vertically and cruise like a plane. And they're electric. That means they're powered by electric propulsion. Here's how it works. Anything that flies relies on 4 forces to move up and through the air. These forces are lift, thrust, drag, and weight. A helicopter takes off and lands vertically, but relies on a single rotor to provide both the lift and thrust needed to fly. EVTOLs run on electric motors instead of jet fuel. The motors are distributed around the aircraft to power rotors and propellers, which provide thrust. And that's where the designs can get a little interesting. EVTOLs all look and fly completely differently. And EVTOLs have a couple of key advantages. They're typically quieter than helicopters. They emit less carbon, in theory anyways. And they're equipped with advanced flight control systems, which means they could be capable of autonomous flight. But we'll get to that later.
It's a fun fact, but our battery alone weighs more than the rest of the vehicle.
Remember, weight. One of the 4 forces that govern flight, it's crucial when it comes to getting anything airborne. And here's the thing, batteries are heavy, which is not great when you're already fighting gravity. It's because batteries have a lower energy density than fuel, which basically means that for their weight, batteries can't store as much energy. For example, you'd need roughly 50 kilograms of lithium-ion batteries to hold as much energy as just 1 kilogram of jet fuel.
Batteries are really critical to this whole equation. To a certain degree, they govern the capability and the performance of these aircraft. The batteries dictate the range, they dictate the power, they dictate the payload, how many people or how much cargo these things can carry, they dictate how fast they can recharge.
In recent years, there have been advancements in alternative sources of energy, like hybrid power and hydrogen. But for now, batteries are our best bet when it comes to electric flight.
In the years since it was first developed in the 1970s, chemists have improved just how much energy each kilogram of a lithium-ion battery can hold. That improvement has been quite linear for the past 3 decades, enabling us to start to put lithium-ion batteries first in electronics like laptops and iPods, and then eventually in electric cars. Some say that there are real upper limits for how much batteries can store in energy for each kilogram of that battery. And that limit shows up in, say, long-haul aviation. If you wanted to build an electric plane that would fly from London to New York, you're unlikely to be able to get a battery that would make that flight economically viable.
It's this limitation that makes EVTOLs suited for shorter trips with lighter loads. And the better that battery tech can get, the more potential they might have.
We are testing battery cells under aerospace-specific loads. As you can see here, as the aircraft takes off, it goes through a cruise, and then it lands. And what we're really doing is that we're understanding how these guys perform in flight.
One person who is looking into the limits of battery power in electric aviation is Matthew Clark.
We are seeing a lot of EVTOLs in the past, I would say, 2 decades because of the advancements of electric energy storage. Batteries that usually have lower energy densities are reaching the energy densities that can make short routes possible. Unfortunately, right now, many of the cells that are used today limit the range and operation of these aircraft. And as a result, they can only fly maybe 150 nautical miles.
But are batteries where they need to be?
Batteries are getting better every year. Not at the speed that we want them to in the aerospace community, but they're getting better every year. There's going to be a natural progression of checking what I call the illities, the manufacturability, the integrity, all these illities that have to be considered when you're taking any research product to make it a commercial one.
In other words, what's possible now and what's scalable are 2 different things. And while we wait for scientists to improve battery technology, there's no shortage of companies looking to cash in right now.
Load flight plan 1063-1, please.
Flight plan 1063-1 in 3, 2.
Archer's aircraft development company that's building a new type of airplane where we're leveraging technology around batteries, electric motors to develop a brand new type of aircraft.
Everybody ready for flight?
Tower, Archer 1, request clearance to flight plan 1063.
So in the lab here, the process starts with this station where we're taking cells and starting to test them and put them in the battery packs.
Archer is one of the many eVTOL companies globally that's racing to commercialize their aircraft in cities around the world. As of 2025, they had a market valuation of around $4 billion, and investors including Stellantis, United Airlines, BlackRock, just to name a few. They also have contracts with the US military.
We're here at our certification flight simulator in our integrated test lab. The hardware you see here is the real flight hardware from the aircraft, running the real flight software so that we can test with pilots in the loop and exercise the entire system functionality. Our team is just under 1,000 people right now. We have a handful of other facilities where we do manufacturing of the motors and batteries, do system integration testing, and really prove that all the components and systems work together. And then another facility around here where we build our initial aircraft. We've also got a factory that we've just built out in the state of Georgia.
Archer is scaling up. And they're not the only ones. They're not even the only ones in Silicon Valley.
I have a 2-hour commute from where my home is, and so I fly instead of drive because the flight is only 20 minutes instead of a 2-hour drive. So I am a personal use case of how I could use and fly in a Joby aircraft.
Bonnie Simi is the president of operations at Joby Aviation. She's also a former Olympian luge competitor, but that's another story.
Our use case, of course, is in large cities that are very, very congested. Imagine that you're in a congested city in downtown and you need to get to the airport. Let's say it's in New York City. You would think, okay, if I get into a taxi, it's gonna take me maybe 45 minutes, maybe 2 hours, you just don't know. Imagine instead, you could pull up an app and select a ride to the airport.
Joby, like other eVTOL companies, is banking on the idea of the air taxi. Founded in 2009, they've raised over $2.5 billion in funding so far.
Initially, we were funded through venture funds. Toyota alone has invested almost $1 billion, about $890 million.
One person with an interest in the eVTOL industry is Robin Rydell, a certified commercial pilot who co-leads the McKinsey Center for Future Mobility. Full disclosure, he says he's offered consulting services to several eVTOL companies, but couldn't say which ones because of confidentiality agreements.
The VTOL industry has developed quite a bit over the last, call it, decade or so. And so what we've seen is that industry grow from, small startups that were funded by, a few individuals in some cases, maybe some of the larger companies doing a bit of experimentation in aerospace, into standalone companies.
It's difficult to keep track of just how many eVTOL companies exist in the world today. But there are a few leading the charge. In China, there's companies like EHang and Aerofugia. In Brazil, there's Eve Air Mobility. The US has Joby Aviation, Archer Aviation, Whisk Aero, owned by Boeing, and Beta Technologies. Airbus is in France, and Vertical Aerospace is in the UK. And there's no shortage of big names in the automotive, cargo, and aviation industries getting involved.
If you look at just the eVTOL manufacturers, so the startups and so on that are building these vehicles, we're somewhere between $20 to $25 billion in funding overall. And if you compare that to traditional aircraft program, that's actually a good chunk of money. That's about, maybe 1 to 2 traditional large aircraft programs worth of funding that we're seeing.
But money isn't a guarantee.
The big conundrum when it comes to the eVTOL industry is that there are billions of dollars being injected into it. There's billions of dollars that have been spent designing and manufacturing these aircraft for a business that has no proven demand.
So fundamentally, eVTOL is still a very early industry. We still don't know if the operations will be viable from a financial point of view. And so this is still a risky investment.
Some companies have already started struggling for funding.
We had Volocopter, for example, in Europe, missed a planned entry into the Paris Olympics. At the end of last year, they filed for insolvency.
And if eVTOLs are ever going to become a reality, there's still one teeny tiny hurdle they'll need to overcome.
Certification and regulation is one of the biggest variables here. And I think a lot of people talk about type certification of the aircraft, which is getting an aircraft certified. But there's a number of other regulations that matter a lot, right? There's operating regulation. For example, how much reserve do you need to leave in your battery to plan for unforeseen events? That hasn't been figured out yet. Or, how do you train pilots for these vehicles, right? What kind of licenses do they need to hold? Or how do you think about what a vertiport needs to look like?
The primary goal is to make a safe aircraft. And then going along with that is getting the aircraft certified. The levels at which we are certifying are comparable to commercial airliners that fly around today. And so whether or not we're flying passengers or cargo like boxes, that level of safety needs to be in the same spot.
As it turns out, it's not so simple to get something certified to fly commercially. And that's probably a good thing. In order for any aircraft to be able to fly, it needs to be regulated and certified. This would be the FAA in the US, EASA in the EU, and the CAAC in China. And eVTOLs are still so new, there weren't even rules for them until recently. In October 2024, the FAA announced the powered lift category for a new class of aircraft, which includes, you guessed it, eVTOLs. It's the first new category for civilian aircraft since helicopters were introduced in the 1940s. But certification, it takes time. While companies like Joby and Archer work with organizations like the FAA towards certification, they're also eyeing places like the UAE to deploy in the meantime. In China, it's forging ahead with its own regulation.
It's a global industry, certainly, but I think that the leaders are more or less represent a North America, China face-off, if you like. And EHang on the other side of the world already has an autonomous vehicle capable of carrying 2 passengers.
Remember autonomous flight? Like their electric land-based counterparts, one of the appeals of eVTOLs being electric is that there's potential to take the pilot out of the equation entirely.
EHang in China is right at the front end of autonomous eVTOL flight, which is remarkable. And we're some way off that situation in other parts of the world.
Many companies looking to launch eVTOLs commercially are starting out with pilots on board. But China-based EHang is moving forward with autonomous flight, straight out of the gate. They say their 2-seat eVTOL has completed pilotless flights across 19 countries.
I'm about to step into a flying taxi, and if that's not radical enough for you, this one has no pilot.
In the air, please do not touch the door.
Okay. I can't believe I'm doing this and that there's nobody flying this. We're about to lift off. It's quite exciting, but here we go. It's a bit noisier than I expected, and I won't be looking down too much because I am afraid of heights, but right now it feels very safe.
My colleague did take a flight in the EHang Autonomous eVTOL, which is like a little bubble, and he described the experience as slightly unnerving, slightly exposed, noisier than expected, but something that he got used to by the end of the flight. When you think about it, it's a very novel experience getting in an aircraft with no pilot. That's something that even the eVTOL manufacturers admit will take time to, I guess, win over people's trust. We've been accustomed to flying with a pilot for 100 years.
Pilot or not, people are going to have to trust flying in an eVTOL, and safety is a big part of that.
Safety concerns surrounding the eVTOL industry are similar to every kind of air travel industry. Are these aircraft safe? Are they reliable? And if there's no pilot in the front, are they going to be able to deal with unexpected emergencies?
Air taxi 7-5, entering control zone is approved.
Delta 6 and Delta 1, holding short from
There's a lot of air traffic already going on. Here in the middle, you see the airport of Hamburg, where we are. One runway to the north, where we have an aircraft waiting for departure. The Ryanair is just landing. And then all these labels, which say ATMC something, these are all air taxis. And they're all coming to the airport or from the airport from different places in the city center. And here you see a landing happening just now.
Before the real-life scramble of introducing unmanned air taxis to the skies, the DLR Institute of Flight Guidance at the German Aerospace Center is offering a peek into the future of air travel, all from the comfort of a simulation.
What we have seen earlier was the working position of an air traffic controller in a tower at an airport. So that would be the very near future, where we have probably piloted air taxis that can do voice communication with a human controller in the tower. And what we see here is a little bit more into the future. We have no voice communications with the vehicle directly. There's no pilot on board. So we do all digital here through the control systems.
EVTOLs are going to need to do a lot more than just fly. They're going to need a place to land. They'll need to be able to navigate air traffic and cities with lots of people.
Urban air mobility or innovative air mobility, that is the broader term for the whole ecosystem. So we have to think about the vehicle, the infrastructure, the operation, but also about the public acceptance. If you want to have flying EVTOLs in cities, first of all, you need a vertiport, because that is the landing site where we would expect EVTOLs to start and land. And then when you think about more the operational aspect, there are challenges like bird strikes, other flying vehicles, hobby drones, fireworks. That would be a challenge. And the last challenge is, of course, the weather. Probably not all of the EVTOLs we currently see as prototypes will be capable of flying in really bad weather.
Flying cars may still be a long way off, but EVTOLs are very much here.
Touchdown.
But when, where, how, and even if we see them shuttling people around the skies is still a big question.
There are a lot of issues that need to be addressed before EVTOLs take flight. But I have no doubt that you will see them. I mean, they are flying already, but most of these flights are demo flights.
Within the next few years, it's very likely that we will see commercial EVTOL operations, but they will start with very few numbers in a few example cities.
One of the more interesting things I've heard recently is the future's already here, it's just not equally distributed. And I think this will very much apply to EVTOL, and does. Don't forget, even though all of us now have smartphones, that was a 30-year journey to get there. So this technology, even though it's here, it won't be here for everybody from the beginning.
We could see these companies rewrite urban transit maps around the world if they can offer a new form of air travel that's convenient and that's affordable. At the same time, it could just fizzle into a niche market only within reach of the very richest travelers, and in the process burn up billions of dollars of invested capital.